Hey everybody, welcome to the official Karma Dog YouTube channel, the channel for people who love music things. I've had a number of requests that I go through some of my instruments and gear and show how I make music. So here I'll be doing a tour of my collection. This video is mainly for people without much experience with synthesizers, so I won't go into too much detail on any particular instrument, but I'll show you what I use and how I connect them and use them together to make music. And if you are a synth head, you might enjoy this too. I will be making more detailed videos about the specifics of each of these machines and how I like to use them later on, so if that interests you, I recommend you subscribe and watch for those. I use only analog hardware instruments. No soft synths, no digital audio workstation. I use my computer only for recording. This isn't because of any conscious, deliberate choice I've made. I'm a keyboard player. I started out playing synthesizers. When I got my first drum machine, I learned how to sync it with a synth, and as soon as I discovered how awesome that was it. I've added more instruments and modules, and I've been having so much fun just with that, I simply never got around to learning how to use software like Ableton Live or Cubase. DAWs are great, I have nothing against them, they can do stuff that I certainly can't do with this gear. This is simply how I approach electronic music making. As I said, I use my computer to record from a line coming directly out of my mixer, so here we go. We'll start here and work our way around counterclockwise. This is my Moog Prodigy. I think of her as my Millennium Falcon. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts. The Prodigy was introduced by Moog Music as a simpler, more affordable alternative to synths like the Mini Moog. From what I understand, it's about half a Mini Moog in terms of features, but the sound is comparable. Mostly that's due to the legendary patented Moog 4-pole low-pass ladder filter. The way this works is that an oscillator generates a waveform with a bright sound and a lot of overtones, and you filter out those overtones to change and shape the sound. Because we're subtracting overtones, we call this subtractive synthesis. By emphasizing the cutoff frequency of the filter, you get that really distinctive sound associated with classic synthesizers. The Prodigy has pretty much all the basic essential elements of a good monosynth. Along with the filter, it has an envelope, which can be used to shape the dynamics of each note. It can be nice and smooth, or it can be sort of plucky, or it can be staccato. It has everything you need for that classic Moog sound. Moog synths are known to sound really great with a little bit of reverb. And I also like to add effects like distortion. Moving to our left, counterclockwise in our little circle, we travel forward in time to 1982 with the Juno 60 by Roland. The biggest difference between the Juno and the Prodigy is that the Prodigy is a monosynth, meaning it plays only one note at a time. The Juno has 6 voices, so you can play up to 6 notes at a time. This is sort of my desert island synth. If I had to get rid of everything but one, this is probably the one I'd keep. love it not only for the variety of sounds it can produce, but also for how easily and quickly you can adjust every aspect of the sound. It has a low-pass filter similar to the one used by Moog, so you still have that subtractive synth sound. Also like the Prodigy, it has an envelope that is very easy to adjust. In my opinion, it's easier than the Prodigy's. This allows you to very quickly change the character of the music you're playing. The Juno 60 is a synth you've probably heard many times. It's been used by The Cure, A Flock of Seagulls, the Eurythmics, and so on. Today, bands like Boards of Canada and other retro-ish bands often use the Juno 60. One feature that makes the Juno very popular is the arpeggiator, which works like this. Once you turn on the arpeggiator, if you hold one note, it'll steadily repeat that one note. If you hold two notes, it'll alternate between them, one at a time. Same if you play three or more. So, if you hold a chord, it will play an arpeggio of that chord. If you adjust the speed of the arpeggiator, you can get that cool 8-bit video game sound. I'll show you some more ways to use the arpeggiator later in the video. Like the Prodigy, a little effects go a long way with the Juno. Here's some reverb. And some distortion. Distortion is especially great if you play with the filter cut off. I'll come back to that little box in a few minutes. Moving on, here we have the hub of my setup. This is the Akai Rhythm Wolf, one of the most maligned machines in all of synthdom. It came out in 2015 and has probably gotten more undeserved hate than any other piece of gear I know of. It may not be perfect, and it may not do everything, but it does a lot. And if you take the time to work with it, it's a really cool piece of gear. It has sort of a lo-fi, primitive, almost 8-bit sound, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I personally like it better than, for example, the Korg Volca beats. Plus, the Volca doesn't do some of the things I use the Wolf for. It's not an 808, and it's not a 303, but if you spend some time with it, you can make it sound really good. You have your kick drum. Some people complain about the kick, but with some experimentation, you can get a good, albeit limited, kick sound. I think the hi-hats sound excellent. I think the snare is very good, unless you're looking for a really specific sort of snare sound. And it has this weird little clicky percussion sound, which can be a nice addition to the mix. But what I really like is that it's not only a drum machine, it has a bass sequencer. I've seen a lot of video reviews that make the bass sound terrible, but again, if you take the time to learn it, you can get a lot out of it and it sounds great. It has this distortion feature, which allows you to get some nice acid house bass lines. So far, I've just been running the sound dry, but if you add just a little reverb, the sound gets much richer. This is just the smallest amount of hall reverb from a very cheap zoom pedal, and it instantly makes the sound much deeper. So for just one inexpensive little box, it's really not bad at all. One of these days I plan to make a tutorial on how to get the most out of a Rhythm Wolf, so look for that soon. In addition to the sounds, it has great connective features. Like I said, I use it as a hub to control all my other gear. First, I have the gate trigger out patched into the arpeggiator clock on the Juno, so the two can be synchronized. So that's pretty cool. Next, the Wolf also has MIDI out, and here I'm using it to clock this weird little box. This is the Electro-Harmonix 8-step CV Sequencer. If you have a Juno, you should definitely get one of these. It has an easily adjusted sequence of up to 8 steps, with each step sending out a control voltage signal. I patched this signal to the filter input on the back of the Juno, which is a feature I think a lot of people overlook. I pretty much ignored it for the first few years I owned my Juno. But running this sequence signal into the filter allows you to create complex, colorful, pulsing rhythmic patterns. And it's in sync with the Rhythm Wolf. If you use the CV sequencer and the arpeggiator, you can add irregular, unpredictable accents, adding rhythmic interest to the arpeggiated patterns. Again, one of these days I'll make a tutorial on how to get the most out of this combination. You can even randomize the steps of the sequence, which makes for some very interesting rhythms. I've recorded several tracks and made some videos using just these three things, and they've turned out pretty cool. So let's move on around the circle. Here's where we start getting into the area of modular or semi-modular synthesizers. Modular synthesizers are comprised of modules that are meant to be patched together with other modules. For example, rather than an oscillator, filter, and envelope housed in a single unit, a modular synth is usually comprised of several separate modules, each performing one or more of these functions, patched together to work as a complete instrument. This offers the user endless flexibility and choices concerning the kinds of sounds that can be made and how to make them. What I have, for now, are known as semi-modular synths. A semi-modular houses all the necessary components to make music on its own, but it has inputs and outputs that can be patched to external modules or to other semi-modular synths, opening a much greater range of possibilities. This weird-looking little guy is the No Coast, a semi-modular synth introduced by Make Noise in 2017. It employs a different approach to producing electronic sound. Unlike the Prodigy and Juno, which use subtractive synthesis, filtering out overtones, the No Coast uses what's usually called additive synthesis, where you start with a simple waveform like a triangle wave, then you add, blend, and multiply overtones on top of that. The resulting sounds are often described as metallic, bright, edgy, gritty, abrasive. The no-coast can produce a smooth, clean sound as well, but getting these gnarly tones from it is very easy, and it's perhaps what it does best. The sound is usually very different from a subtractive style synth, which is why I like having it in my collection. The no-coast itself does not have its own keyboard, and while it is capable of generating tones without one, a guy like me prefers to have an external keyboard controller or sequencer. Here I'm using the Keystep made by Arturia, and it's a great controller with many features. First of all, like the Juno, it has an arpeggiator. And guess what? The arpeggiator can be clocked with the Rhythm Wolf. I have a splitter cable which lets me send the Wolf's gate out to both the Juno and the Keystep, and also into the tempo of the no-coast. In addition to the arpeggiator, the no-coast has an onboard sequencer. This means you can compose a sequence of notes that will automatically be played by any synth or module it happens to be patched into. And of course, it plays in time with the Rhythm Wolf and everything else. With a sequencer playing the notes automatically, this frees up both hands so you can focus on sound shaping or playing another synth. Moving right along, we come to this little monster here. This is actually two semi-modular synths, both made by Moog, mounted on a single rack. The bottom one is the Mother 32, introduced in 2016. As you can see, I'm kind of a big Moog guy. Immediately, you'll notice it sounds a lot like the Prodigy we explored earlier. This is because it has similar components, most notably that classic filter which makes it sound like a Moog. It also has an envelope, and other components typically found in a Moog monosynth. The big difference here is the patch bay of 32 inputs and outputs, which open possibilities that you don't have on a Prodigy or on a Mini Moog, for that matter. For example, a sound like this is not possible on a Prodigy. Furthermore, the Mother 32 has an onboard sequencer, which allows you to compose and store many sequences, and guess what? You can sync it with another device, such as the Rhythm Wolf. Even if you mute all the instruments on the Wolf, or whatever you're using, these sequences will continue to play in time with one another. Next, on the top tier of this rack is the Drummer from Another Mother, by Moog of course, also known as the DFAM. This came out in 2017, and I think the name is misleading. Many observers complain that it's not a drum machine, and I agree. I don't think it's designed to be a drum machine, and if you try to use it like one, you'll be disappointed. I think of it as a rhythm synthesizer because it has an 8-step sequencer that is meant to be programmed on the fly, and what it does best is create sounds that are primarily rhythmic, usually percussive. Like the other Moogs I've shown you, it has a cutoff filter, which can be adjusted. The envelope only allows a quick percussive attack, but you can adjust the decay, so sounds can be long or short. It can be used to make some sort of more or less drum-ish sounds, but I think what it does best are mostly exotic, skronky, glitchy sounds like what you're hearing now. Finally, there's this little box up here. This is a Korg SQ1 CV Sequencer. I like it and I use it a lot, but I find it a bit touchy when it comes to syncing it with my other gear. From what I can tell, the Korg clock is simply different. Not a problem really. What I do is set it to its own separate tempo and patch it into some parameter like, say, a filter or whatever, at a rate not in sync with everything else. And this is fun because it modulates the sound in a way that keeps the sequences from getting too repetitive or predictable. Here, it's adding a little spice to the DFAM, making its 8-step pattern a little more interesting. So, now I've shown you just a quick introduction to each of these instruments. Let's put them together for a quick jam. As we go along, I'll share a little info about how I have the instruments patched together. Okay everyone, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share, like, all that stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye!